Welcome to the WA Property Q&A, the podcast where I explore the ins and outs of buying property in Western Australia. I'm your host, Peter Fletcher, and each week I interview local property experts to help you to develop a deep understanding of the nuances of buying property in WA. From market trends to legal considerations, no topic is off limits. But before we dive in, a friendly reminder. While we provide valuable information, it's important to note that nothing discussed in this podcast should be construed as personal investment advice. Always remember to seek the appropriate professional advice for your specific circumstances. Now, let's get started and unlock the secrets to successful property buying in WA. Welcome to another episode of the WA Property Q&A podcast. And with me today, I have Tim Connoley from Urbis Consulting. Is that right, Tim?
Yeah, just Urbis.
Just Urbis, yes. And Tim's a partner there, so does a lot of work with large-scale developers. So, Tim, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, no worries. Pleasure to be here, and thanks for the conversation. I lead a team of largely economists, but development advisors as well, so people with either development background or feasibility background, and work across a team with heritage, archaeology, urban design, landscape architecture, town planning, and valuations as well.
Archaeology?
Yes.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, I guess it's kind of a natural kind of evolution for the business because a lot of the focus is on property and places and, increasingly all the easy areas to develop have already been developed and built. So we're increasingly getting into more kind of challenging areas, and particularly I think there's stronger recognition now of trying to involve kind of First Nations and tell the stories that come with that as well. So archaeology has been kind of a key kind of service for us to be able to do that. It's also really important for some of the renewable energy projects that we're looking at because a lot of those are in regional areas where there's traditionally been some First Nation history as well. So, they get out on site and do excavations, very different to my role and my team's role, which is very much behind a desk. So when I think of large-scale developments, like that greenfield development stuff that we were talking about before, I always imagined that it was all about numbers and town planning and roads and parks and stuff like that. But you're saying that archaeology, that sort of thing is very much in play there. Yeah, I think a lot of the, increasingly so a lot of the kind of leading developments are going, well, how can we distinguish ourselves? But also they've got their own social license and corporate responsibility obligations as well. So they're trying to do things differently, do things better. And if you develop it in areas where there's a history and a story to tell, then they're looking at that. So, the team that leads that area has been able to, talk to traditional owners and start to understand the stories of the place and try to embed that story in the new communities that are built.
Does that make for a more interesting suburb?
I think it's more interesting, but also, if you bring it back to why developers are doing it as well, it starts to, distinguish the kind of type of community you're going to create as well. And sometimes they're small things. It might be artwork, but it's also the way that it's designed and where, and the type of places that might be reserved for public open space and conservation areas as well, which might have more meaning.
Okay. Now, what are the global trends that are shaping our cities?
I think the main one is population and migration. I mean, Australia and Perth in particular has been a significant beneficiary of population growth. It's been dramatic growth. I've been here since 2011, and I remember coming over at the time, having never been to Perth before, and there was 70,000 people moving in every year. And, the communities and the town or the city was rapidly kind of growing. And we've continued to kind of benefit from that growth. It brings challenges, but a lot of people see and aspire to moving to Australia for all the economic opportunities here, the employment, the lifestyle, the good quality healthcare and education that we have. So we're a magnet for people, not just from developing countries, but equally so from developed countries. I mean, we're getting significant growth from New Zealand and the UK, as well as Southeast Asia and your subcontinent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's why we've rapidly kind of grown to more north of 3 million people now in Perth. And, that's shaping Perth pretty rapidly and kind of even regional areas in the state. The other one is really around, we're seeing urbanisation just more generally as well. So there's a strong preference to move from regional areas to urban cities. So a lot of the growth is particularly in Perth. You could argue that, there's some benefits to getting more people to move to regional areas in particular, but people have a strong preference to live in an urban environment and have access to kind of all the fun things and activities and healthcare and everything that you can get in a capital city.
Is that something that needs to be addressed in terms of making better use of those regional infrastructures that are already in place?
Definitely. I mean, I remember doing a fair bit of regional work around the time of royalties for regions, which it really had a strong focus on trying to address some of the inequity around access to health and education, even kind of public realm and sporting facilities and so forth, and invested heavily in regional areas. And that led to, more growth than would have occurred in a number of towns, particularly in wheatbelt towns and so forth as well. Communities in the Pilbara, which traditionally weren't fast-growing areas, have benefited. Now you've got a town of Karratha with, close to 30,000 people there.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of benefit in driving more growth to these regional areas. The challenge is the same as for every new person, you need, other services to go with it.
Mm.
And it's traditionally more costly to deliver that new infrastructure in regional areas. So I think we can aspire to, and we should try to drive more people into regional areas, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's easier.
Mm-hmm. What about environmentalism and sustainability, that whole conversation? Is that a big factor? Because it sounds like a big factor from where I sit, but is it an actual big factor?
In terms of developers, where to develop and so forth, or how they incorporate it? I mean...
Or the shape of our city, is it like a...
Yeah, I mean, well, if you look at Perth, it's a significant kind of biodiversity kind of hotspot. And, we were talking before about how capital cities grow and how Perth grows in particular. What we've seen, for instance, in Sydney and why there's been kind of rapid price growth as well is it's heavily constrained by state forests and the Blue Mountains and so forth. So Perth has some of those same constraints. We've got significant kind of biodiversity areas that will limit the shape and the way that the city develops and has. So yeah, it's a really key factor. And what we're seeing is it's very much a drying climate as well. So So water's a real challenge. So the state government therefore is investing in another desal plant up north, but we're rapidly just going to be solely reliant on desal. So yes, it's a significant kind of consideration, and sustainability is starting to be then embedded in a lot of the projects that we're working on as well. There's a strong focus on trying to drive particularly energy through kind of solar and batteries, but also starting to look at other things as well around recycling water and other initiatives as well.
Are those things that developers are starting to build into their suburbs, into their precinct plans?
I think some are. I mean, there's some good examples. I mean, we're fortunate in some respects that one of the largest developers is the state government. They partner on a lot of developments, and given their kind of cost of capital and their role, they do try to embed innovation in a number of projects. So they partner with your Lendlease and your Stockland and Sanley and so forth, and generally they try to deliver a degree of kind of innovation in those projects. So we're seeing some good kind of pilot projects, which then hopefully then start to roll out and at least demonstrate to other developers that they're viable solutions. I think developers are really keen. It's just, is it front of mind for buyers has always been the challenge, and how much weight do buyers put on sustainability initiatives in their community?
Sorry to interrupt, what's your take on buyer demand for sustainability?
I mean, we ran some focus groups with some communities on the fringe, well, not the fringe, but in greenfield areas, and we're asking them kind of like, what's your daily habits and your drivers and so forth. And a lot of the sentiment is just making ends meet at the moment. So we're at a point in time where costs have increased substantially, and even a number of participants in those focus groups working multiple jobs. we had one person that was working, a well-paid kind of council job and also a second job as well to make ends meet. So sustainability to them when we're asking those questions was not front of mind. So yes, it's something it'd be great to take advantage of, for instance, state and federal subsidies on batteries, which are out at the moment. But it's a substantial cost, You've still got to put forward the money to then potentially get the savings over a number of years. So I think for a number of buyers, it's definitely a consideration. But when it comes to the rub of, are you going to pay out of your pocket up front for it? It's still a challenge.
Yeah, so which is to the point about those battery arrays and that sort of thing. Well, yes, I could as a developer put that in, but if the punters don't want it, if they don't want to pay the extra for their block of land because of that, no point.
Yeah, but I mean, the positive thing is that, the capital that sits behind, particularly listed developers, is saying we need you as a company to be more sustainable, to drive innovation. You're looking at all your kind of listed developers will be trying to embed innovation and are embedding innovation in their projects. And sometimes, they're kind of small things and it might be more community related, but you've got community batteries, for instance, that Cedar Woods has rolled out in Eglinton, and you've got a similar kind of project that Lendlease partnered with, I think it was Synergy, to do in Alkimos as well. So, and there, there's a clear benefit to home buyers in terms of the bills that they pay on power, but those companies are being asked to try to be better at how they deliver projects.
Now, when you're putting a development together or you're consulting, what's your time horizon?
Well, it's very long. I mean, it depends who you're kind of talking to. Like if we're doing apartment projects, we're probably looking over a 2-3 year horizon for them to start to understand, well, who's your market going to be? How quickly are you going to launch, and who are your competitors going to be over that time frame? If we're talking to greenfield developers, so residential subdivision, and particularly ones that do master plan communities, which are 1,000-2,000 lots, you're looking at 20-30 years for those developers. They're very much, it's to some extent, it's a bit of crystal ball gazing, but it's also starting to look back and go, well, how's the city going to develop? What are other areas that are going to develop over time as well? What are current development areas that are going to run out of stock over that time? And who are you going to compete with? But also other aspects too, like who's your market going to be? If you go back 10, 15, 20 years, a lot of the migration was from England and South Africa. But now India's the largest cohort for our migration. So that starts to change where, if that's the new customer that you're going to cater to, where are they going to live? And predominantly it's the southeast and the northeast corridor. So you also need to start to look at, well, how's that migration going to change over time as well? If you look at, give an example, so you start to look at, say, a future estate in the southeast corridor, a developer then will ask a range of questions. They'll be like, well, what's the infrastructure going to be that's going to support this development? And a clear one there is the Tonkin Highway extension. So if you've got a site in Mundachong, you're going, well, we're going to benefit from the Tonkin Highway being extended. That's going to make it more accessible, and that's going to be a key driver. You've got the new rail that's being built as well. Then you start to look at, well, will people have much choice in the corridor as well? So where's other land supply that we're going to compete against? There's a declining supply in Lyford, but you are seeing some areas around Cardup that have been rezoned, so they'll be competitors, and that's the type of mindset they'll start to think about. And then that gives them a sense of, are we going to be in a state that's going to sell 100 lots a year or 200 lots a year?
What makes for a good suburb? You just mentioned freeway extensions, train extensions. What makes for a good suburb? What does a developer need to build to make a good suburb or to make a livable place livable?
Yeah, well, it depends kind of what market they're targeting as well. Like if you're doing an infill subdivision, which is townhouse product where you might be catering to kind of young professionals and downsizers, there you're trying to look at, well, are you in a good school catchment? Because your family cohort is probably going to have older children, high school age children, Are you going to be readily kind of accessible to the CBD because most of your buyers are going to be probably professionals? If you're doing let's say call it kind of outer suburban development, who's probably going to cater more to kind of first home buyers who are probably more going to be in the trades or health and social services, then it's not as much about access to the CBD. Yes, it's important to some aspect as well, but it's more about, are you accessible to some key kind of employment nodes? So are you accessible to your Rockingham or your Joondalup or your Armidale and or Midland and some of these kind of more major employment areas? Are you planning to deliver a level of kind of education and retail amenity and recreational amenity as well? So, where are the parks and what's the scale of parks? When are they going to be delivered? When's the school going to be delivered? And all these aspects as well. And then there's the other things as well, like what are you going to do to actually make it a community and feel like a community really early on in the development? Are you going to deliver early activation? And a number of developers do this and they see the benefits of it, where, your sales office, becomes very much your kind of early meeting place and your kind of social hub, and you have a cafe, and a lot of developers subsidise an early cafe being introduced and invest heavily in a park. And we're seeing quite significant high quality kind of playgrounds and parks being built in the States.
A good example of that, Tim, sorry to interrupt, is I think it's Alkimos. I think it's a pub 1927. I can't remember the actual name of it, but there's the sales office, and right next door to it is this really nice little pub with, like, there's the ocean and you've got a big park and you can see all the lots that are being built just right there. And it's actually a good vibe. The people come there and that it feels like this real country town, like coastal community feel. I love it.
And to them, it's a marketing aspect as well. I mean, if you live in the area, you might invite some friends and say, let's come and meet there. They'll come and they'll see, okay, there is a community that's been built here, and they'll consider it. So, a lot of those things are really important, and yes, pubs or cafes, but early kind of supermarket provision as well has become really important too.
Yeah, so places like Butler and that general area up there, it's really well serviced for shops. You've got some big box items shopping up there, and it's pretty good.
Yeah, and there's significant plans to continue to grow new shopping as well. We're seeing there's a Costco proposed in Alkimos.
Really?
And a large format. You've got Centurion in there that's going to build a neighbourhood shopping centre as well. So, and a lot of that investment occurs across all our kind of growth corridors as well. But that's really important to turn these areas into communities and minimise how much people need to drive to access these services.
So when those areas are conceptualised, I imagine it's not just one developer that does it all. How did the developers and the state government work together to sort of go, okay, well, this is what the long-term play is for this, these hundreds of hectares of land?
Yeah. Well, I mean, historically, there were large land holdings, and you could get one developer that comes in and does a really large master plan community and can control that. You look at Ellenbrook, which is probably the key kind of case study there. That's been developing for 30 years, and that was the state government partnering with LWP, or now Sanderley. But now you've got the areas that are urban zoned land are highly fragmented. You're looking at developers that need to talk to landowners that are in kind of 2 hectare rural residential properties, and they need to sign up 30, 40 of those landholders or landowners to start to get enough kind of scale. So the key instrument that kind of forces that coordination, but that planning is district structure planning. So
that's at a state government level?
Yeah, well, but it's the state government can develop a district structure plan like they have in East Wanneroo. So you had lots of landowners in East Wanneroo. The state government stepped in and said, we're going to do the planning for East Wanneroo. We'll look at, where should the shopping centres be? Where should the open space be? What should the scale and type of density look like as well? Where should the major kind of road infrastructure and future potentially rail or mid-tier transport be? But generally, district structure planning is led by the proponents or the developers in an area.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at fragmented areas, typically the main developers will work together and develop a district structure plan, which will look at locations for schools and so forth as well. And, that's the key kind of instrument that's used. And then the subsequent planning then is your kind of local structure planning, which kind of each individual developer will probably do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So there's like this prevailing narrative that goes, oh, we can't afford to continue with this urban sprawl. We just can't keep building houses forever. Otherwise, we'll end up in Geraldton, as we talked about off air. What's your take on that? Because we've been talking about large-scale development that's not infill. Can we be sustainable and continue to grow outwards?
Well, it's a very topical question at the moment because, as we discussed, Perth is seeing, we'll call it kind of the urban footprint expansion at the moment. And a key constraint on that has been the provision of kind of timely infrastructure, particularly kind of water, waste and power, to some extent, some road infrastructure, but largely they're the main ones. And they're really costly in the current environment. I don't think it's a question necessarily, or it's not something that we think should be top of mind is, should you do urban sprawl or infill? I think it's a combination of both that gives the choice. But is it sustainable? I mean, we're a wealthy state. We can fund and afford some of the infrastructure. It's probably a matter of, do we do these in the right locations? That means that we're not having to pay as much. So that's where you're starting to see new urban development around areas that are probably not at the far edges of the urban footprint, but are more centrally located, so effectively like infill. So you're seeing areas like Jandakot and Treeby go through district structure planning and rezoning at the moment. So areas like that, which are well located to community, civic services, retail services and so forth, they're not a big costly exercise for public infrastructure requirements. Areas like Banjup as well, which are going through rezoning processes. So they're, I think, compared to areas like, if you're looking at further expansions of the urban footprint, they're more affordable locations, and I think we can accommodate those.
I was looking at and it might have even been on your website. I can't remember where I was looking at it. It was a change to Melbourne's parking requirements, where they had virtually zero requirement for parking if you were within, let's say, 200 metres of a train station. And the further away from the transport nodes you got, the more parking you required. What's your take on that sort of policy?
Oh, I mean, it's trying to drive more people to use active and public transport, really, more than anything. We're seeing that to some extent, like student accommodation projects are being proposed with no parking provision. I don't know if we're going to see many apartments delivered without parking, particularly because, the current main market is downsizers and owner-occupiers in a context like Melbourne. Is that right? Yeah. So, I mean, we're in a market which is really hard to deliver apartments at the moment. It's really costly. There's not many builders. So whilst, the inputs to building an apartment, the materials and the labour probably increased about 60 to 80%, your tendered prices effectively double what they were 5-6 years ago. So yes, there's been price growth, but that cost increase is hard. So that's where we're only seeing apartment development at the moment in the more premium locations, and they're very much targeting your downsizers that are selling out of multi-million-dollar properties. So you're seeing a lot of apartment development around areas like Canning Bridge and the western suburbs, some in the CBD, but less so than what we did 10 years ago in what you'd call the kind of middle ring areas. But it's starting to change. There's SKS is one of the developers, which is looking at another apartment project in Coburn, and that's on the market. So you're starting to see some of these locations where developers are looking at apartments being built. And areas like that, if you go back to your question on parking, you're right next to the train station. They'll be weighing up, what's the level of parking we want to provide? I mean, parking's a cost and it impacts on yield. So if
Mm.
you ideally for an apartment developer's kind of feasibility, if you have no parking, you can get much more significant yield out of it. So typically your parking kind of caps out how many apartments you can build because, it becomes so much more costly to build down, and particularly if you're looking at 2-3 level basements.
And what's your take on how we can get more affordable housing into the supply chain? How can we do that the fastest?
I mean, that's the kind of real front of mind question at the moment. I mean, I don't think there's one solution. I mean, we've been fortunate enough to try to help state and federal government in this regard. And, there are some policy levers. Maybe I'll stand back a bit. I guess if you look at government and what's kind of government's role, they can be a regulator. So that's the kind of policies that they can look at. They can be an investor, so they can directly invest in building social and affordable housing, which they are. They can provide incentives or subsidies. So the federal government's playing that role through Housing Australia at the moment and saying, we'll subsidise if the private sector comes and proposes to deliver social and affordable key work housing as well. And, there are kind of key roles that the government can play. The other one is through what you'd call kind of like enabling infrastructure. And so that's where government can come in and say, well, we're going to get Western Power or Water Corp or these infrastructure agencies to invest in an area that's going to make it more affordable, viable to deliver housing. For a number of years, governments, they were comfortable being a kind of regulator and comfortable with, to some extent, being enabling infrastructure. And now we've seen, nationally, this is much more focus on being an investor or directly delivering housing and subsidising housing. So we've got the federal government playing a role where it really probably hasn't played that role for a long, long time, where it's saying we've got a remit to support social and affordable housing. The last major funding that the federal government provided was in the GFC, and it was in response to the GFC. So it's been 15 years kind of between where the federal government had a role. And we're kind of fortunate in WA in that, we've got the state government historically has played a strong role in directly investing in projects through Landcorp or DevWA now and through Department of Communities or the Housing Authority as previously known. So they're the kind of key instruments you can use. There's really not much else outside of that. There's no magic bullet, unfortunately. So the government is, and when I say government, I mean all governments, even local governments, are playing a role in here. They're looking at everything in those 4 areas. So you're looking at, enabling infrastructure. You're seeing investments in, particularly in those growth corridors, to start to unlock urban zone land a bit quicker. And that is affordable housing because it is housing in locations which is generally probably going to be priced at less than established house prices as well. So, people can get in there at probably house and land packages of 800,000 compared to a median house price of $1 million. And you're seeing quite a significant amount of social and affordable housing. So the state government's building about 13 apartment projects at the moment, which are social, affordable, and some public housing as well. What more can be done? I mean, there's a whole range of planning reform underway. I don't think there's anything necessarily that hasn't been looked at. It's probably just execution, really. All the ideas are there. It's just how do you do it in a way that's kind of fast enough? And how does the rhetoric around some of the kind of policy reforms actually translate into the kind of day-to-day?
So you do a lot of work with government, consulting to government, writing policies, helping them write their policies, etc., as I understand it. What are the things that you're saying that they could do better, that they could do like faster? Is there anything?
Oh, I mean, there's some aspects. I remember if we took a regional kind of context, because that's some of the work we've been doing more recently, the solutional role for governments is a little bit different in that you've got areas where there's effectively kind of market failure. So I remember we're doing some work in Carnarvon, which is an area which has, a relative kind of high level of kind of disadvantage. People, you could buy a block of land for 50 grand up there and it's going to cost you 800,000 to build on. So, so you've got a market there that just doesn't work. It's not incentivizing people to move to the area and invest. A bank's not going to lend. So government's role there is to kind of be the key and only developer there and heavily subsidise, and that's what they do. So Development WA, for instance, a lot of its regional projects, or probably nearly everyone at the moment, is heavily subsidised. So they're delivering blocks of land for, 200,000-300,000 in some locations with a subsidy of $100,000 to $200,000 per lot. So the role of government in those locations is really to say, well, these communities can't survive without additional supply or better quality housing, particularly for, the service workers that you need, people that are going to be teachers and police officers and so forth. So they deliver land to the market. They directly build housing, particularly for state government workers, which get government regional officer housing. And, the other role that we've been playing there is better coordination. So how do you actually talk to private industry as well and start to understand, what are their needs going forward? So a lot of it there has been about how do you actually get people to collaborate and have a better sharing of information so you can start to predict when housing is needed. So, and coordination's hard because it hasn't historically happened that well. So that's been a key role in some of these regional locations. We're fortunate in a kind of Perth context that the planning system generally works pretty well. I think the policy levers are all there. It's just about time. You look at district structure plans, for instance, or structure plans, and these rezoning processes, take years. And when you're in a housing crisis as we are at the moment, you're trying to deliver lots pretty quickly. You've got areas that are identified as plan investigation areas in kind of 2017. None of those have delivered lots yet. So it takes time. You have to go through MRS amendment, district structure planning, local structure planning, subdivision approval, deliver the lots, get them titled, then get a house built on them. The challenge, and that's why we're looking at how can we maybe do infill better. I think one of the aspects that's going to help now is we're starting to see the kind of economics or the feasibility of infill start to change now. So you'll start to see, more kind of what you call kind of modest infill, townhouse development, unit development, low walk-up apartments and so forth. But it's still pretty hard, to find those sites and to find builders to deliver it.
What would you call gentle density? What does that look like to you?
Gentle density. Well, I think that term's from a piece of work we did with CEDA, Committee for Economic Development. I think it's your low-rise development, so it's your townhouse units, walk-up apartments, kind of 3-story. But you can get some really well-designed, 4, 5, 6-story apartments in areas that once you see it there and the way that it's been kind of landscaped and it goes into the urban environment, I don't think, communities need to be worried once you see some really good outcomes there.
Should 3-story townhouses be deemed to comply?
I mean, potentially, yeah. I mean, we've seen New South Wales take an approach where they've got effectively a pattern book of building designs which have said, these can have a smoother pathway to approval. Potentially there's an option here for WA to have a similar process. I mean, the challenge is 3-story apartments they're not really being delivered except for in some really higher amenity areas.
East Perth, for example, back in the day.
Yeah, and we've seen some around South Fremantle in the shoreline development there, Development WA is doing, and you'll start to see some more in some other kind of infill locations as well. But unfortunately, it's really costly at the moment.
Yeah, as soon as you start going up, it starts getting very costly. Yep. I look at some of these places like down in Alkimos or down south, and you're on 2 250, 300 square metres of land, and you look at this house that's on there, and it's a 3x2, and the living areas for the cars are almost bigger than the living areas for the people. And, if they could go up, then that, ratio change and the homes become much more comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a double-edged sword, kind of capital growth in the market. You kind of need it to support investment and support people to make decisions, to buy in areas and so forth. But the risk is, things run away from us pretty quickly and you lose that affordability. So we saw, even in a much tougher market and challenging market, we saw people build double-story homes in these growth suburbs because, you could get a builder to a pretty large kind of 2-story home for kind of 400,000 on top of a block for, say, 300.
Not anymore.
Now it's 800. So it's really challenging, cost of living, there's other things, interest rates increasing again to then encourage that 2-story. I mean, you talk to any of these buyers, they would love to have probably 2-story in a backyard, but, they're making compromises.
Tim, if we were 10 years down the track and you were looking back on us today, what would you say we're getting right and what would you say we're getting wrong?
Ah, there we go. I probably shouldn't be surprised at this question. I guess what are we doing right? I guess maybe I'll start with what are some of the risks. I guess there's a lot of focus at the moment, and rightly so, on trying to deliver housing really quickly in areas. And I think the risk, though, is that potentially we're not going to have the same level of kind of access to kind of regional services and district services that you would get if it was more probably coordinated and planned. But I completely probably respect that, that's probably a risk that we need to probably see and take on board anyway. So the challenge is, we're seeing these areas grow pretty rapidly, and are they the right locations or not? Some of the good things, I mean, I think we're seeing more like what a crisis does is it kind of brings industry and government together, and we're seeing a lot more coordination and collaboration. We're starting to see innovation. There was a few years ago, it was where Perth buyers would just want double brick and it won't change, right? You have a crisis and it
Double
flows through the costs, and now you're seeing quite a significant number of steel-framed and prefab homes. So what it's done is it's sparked innovation. So I think that's a real positive.
Very much.
At the moment, yeah. I mean, it's a hard one in that, you look at Perth and, we are, if you go to other cities and you see the type of development being built, it's high quality over here. And you may not be, you and I might not be the person that will go and want to buy and live in Alkimos and so forth, but those communities that are being built compared to what you see in some other states are really high quality.
Tim, suppose someone's listening or watching this podcast and thinks, I want to reach out to this guy and work with him. How would they go about doing that?
Well, I can probably just Google me, jump on our website and all the details are there. Got a really talented kind of team as well, so feel free to jump on our website and look at
Are you taking applications on your LinkedIn profile?
Applications?
As in, are you taking connection requests on your LinkedIn profile?
Yes, yeah, more than happy to.
Cool. Tim, this has been a good conversation. Very deep, very meaningful. So thank you very much for being part of it.
No worries. Much appreciated.
Thanks for sharing your time and your insights.
My pleasure.
Until next week, this has been Peter Fletcher from the WA Property Q&A podcast. And that wraps up another episode of the WA Property Q&A. We hope you found our discussion valuable and gained some valuable insights into the world of property buying in Western Australia. Remember, while we strive to provide useful information, it's crucial to consult with the appropriate professionals before making any investment decisions. Don't forget to tune in next week for another exciting episode where we continue to unravel the mysteries of the WA property market. If you have any questions or topic suggestions, feel free to reach out to us. Until then, happy property hunting, and remember, to seek the right advice for your personal circumstances. Thank you for listening.